Well, birthday season seems to be descended upon us, doesn't it, my dears? It's happy birthday this, many returns that. And whose birthday is it now? Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry turns 55. And all the stars of Montecito ascend into the firmament. How dare they? Well, of course, Mr. Perry, or Miss Perry, Dame Perry, I'm being naughty, Tyler, our dear friend Tyler, is godfather, isn't he, to the great-granddaughter of the late Queen Liz. Yes, the godfather had a wonderful birthday bash. In fact, I've heard tell, and so will you if you're au fait with some corners of YouTube, he's had a few bashes on his birthday in his time, hasn't he, my dears? If rumours are to be believed. But I'm sure that such rumours are merely trifling gossip, whispers that have gone awry. Sophistry, you know. The type of sophistry that gets scrubbed from the corners of Wikipedia and the internet. But I'm not going to go there. The Harkles, of course, were the guests of honour, and they were photographed and captured leaving this star-studded bash in high spirits after all the high jinks in the back of a black Range Rover. And the images are rather dark, but you can see her teeth from space, can't you? They are instantly recognisable as the rictus grin of the Duchess of Sussex, next to the very furtive and guilty pupils of the Duke of Sussex, her beloved, who was wearing some sort of grey garment, and there was an unknown accomplice with them who might have been unveiled by now. I don't recognise this gal. And then we had Oprah and Gail, of course, their besties and their neighbours. They were looking like Thelma and Louise, I thought, in their getaway car, with Alicia Keys squatting there in the back. And they stayed at this do for 4 hours, from 7 to 11, so it can't have been a great deal of fun. Parties from 7 to 11, that's when the party starts, isn't it, my dear? It's 11 o'clock, come midnight. Maybe she was scared that she was going to turn back into a pumpkin. But 4 hours it was, and she emerged not in a pumpkin or a coach, and with loads of mice dressed as footmen, but with her security detail, because they cannot go anywhere, but they're in fear of their life because they're so important. And Harry, of course, is a wanted man because of his own revelations in his own book. But they managed to escape, and it was back to Santa Barb's for a normal life. Well, they were already in Santa Barb's, you understand, my dear, but it's Santa Barb's that they wanted to move to for the normal life, isn't it? They wanted to escape the world of celebritydom and paparazzi and all of those auspices of fame, and so they went to LA, and they went to Santa Barb's, and they went to Hollywood, and they went to Tyler Perry's mansion and hung out with all of this, including Meghan's paramour, the Paramount CEO, Brian Robbins, who also made a swift exit with his wife Tracy, and her head was in her hands, and one can only assume that she was absolutely exasperated with Meghan sidling up to her husband all evening, evidently. And you have our sympathy, Tracy dear, you really do. Evidently, Harry had also been enjoying a tennis tournament at the LA Tennis Club over the weekend, for a charity match this was, all for a good cause, much virtue signalling, and he acted as a presenting sponsor through the Archewell Foundation. Meghan was a vision in butter yellow tweed, caramel brown bag, aviator sunglasses, and a self-satisfied smirk. As a follow-up to the whispers that recently emerged on the Hollywood Reporter, thank you for all your comments telling me that the Reporter is a publication of good standing. In the States, Kathleen Rogers was one of the fruits that let me know. I was on the editorial staff of the Hollywood Reporter. We have all types of fruit in the basket, from varied backgrounds, very interesting careers, as I've told you very recently when you furnished me with the stories of your lives in a recent video. And so it does not surprise me at all that we have editors, we have journalists, we have those in the know. I had a PA to a beauty editor of Woman's Own come up, all of these things. But Kathleen was on the editorial staff of the Reporter for 5 years in the late 1980s. It's no gossip rag, it's an industry trade daily that is not necessarily even left-leaning. Sorry if I got that wrong, I think I gave it a Google and assumed that it was left-leaning, but some of you have told me not so much. The fact that this piece ran means that she's really crossed the line with more than one influential industry insider. And you're one of many basketeers that told me the same. That actually this is pretty damning for Meghan Sussex to have such disparagements from what is known in some quarters as a Bible of the Hollywood scene. Isn't it interesting? Harry is going to be returning to his father's kingdom and his brother's future kingdom. Never Harry's kingdom, but he will be returning here on September the 30th for the Wellchild Awards. And that will be his 4th visit of this year. But it doesn't look as if he is going to be crossing paths with Pa, because Pa has other things to do. He's going to be addressing the Scottish Parliament during this period, so he's got a good excuse to avoid the former spare. There has been another glimmer of hope in regards to the Princess of Wales, as Catherine appears in the official record of royal activity this week, the court circular, for the first time since commencing treatment of her withdrawal from public life. And the entry read, "The Princess of Wales, joint patron of the Royal Foundation of the Prince and Princess of Wales, this afternoon held an early years meeting at Windsor Castle," and she last appeared with an identical entry on December the 12th last year, which has been a hiatus of 281 days. The Duchess of Edinburgh has been visiting Tanzania, and I really have to think about this one because for so much of my life I pronounced it Tanzania. And I will always have that in my head when I see it written. But Tanzania. There to deliver a message from the King while celebrating collaboration between our countries on health, agriculture and women's empowerment. She has a busy week from Arusha to Zanzibar, and on the first day of the tour, in a graphic print shirt dress, she visited a health centre for family planning, a child protection unit and a reception recognising progress that's been made in Tanzania to rid the country of the infectious eye disease trachoma. And her ambition is set to eliminate trachoma across the Commonwealth by 2030, and her rousing speech delivered a message from the King commending the efforts. And I will take a moment to reflect on how members of the royal family, such as our Sophie, who are always totally natural, as you can see, and have so much mutual respect with their counterparts internationally in various communities of all colours and creeds. I will take a moment to think about the humiliation that they had to endure and suffer, and the scrutiny they were under in the wake of Harry and Meghan's aspersions. Most thankfully, every single member of the rest of that family continued to channel the royal spirit and went on as they always had. And as a result, their reputation and their standing is no longer in peril and no longer in such tatters. They have played the long game without needing to actually play and strategize at all. They continue doing what they've always done with the same harmonious relations and total atmosphere of mutual respect. And that, it's a reminder of the spanner that they tried to hurl into the works and fuck things up. Well, they failed. Henge Baby says, Artwell River, if the Duchess of Discord does, heaven forbid, alight to get on your shores, there are things she could do while Harry learns to cut ribbons again. If they arrive in time for the Christmas panto season, she could be the bad fairy in Sleeping Beauty, the wicked stepmother in Cinderella, or the wicked stepqueen in Snow White. I want all of those parts, if you don't mind, my dear, particularly if Snow White were played by a Princess Charlotte lookalike. Also, she would positively shine as Cruella de Vil in a remake of 101 Dalmatians. I'm surprised Netflix haven't thought of it, as they're so anxious for their pound of flesh. In the off-season, I'm sure certain discreet and exclusive Soho establishments would be happy to supply a whip and let her ply her trade. Oh, dear. Soho's so sanitised these days, my dear, I'm not even sure that those establishments still exist, more's the pity. Oh, for a bit of Raymond's Review. I'm sure she'd be a great hit. Well, that's a very naughty, a very shady comment, my dear, but I do appreciate it. And it reminded me, you know, of the description that we had in the Hollywood Reporter of Meghan strutting about in heels, terrorising staff. I can't remember the exact way they described it, but normally the description of such a bitch would thrill me, and I might become a fan of them. These scenarios, if they were actually true, would, for my sensibility, add a bit of glamour to the whole affair and the controversy, and some camp appeal. Think Alexis Colby, who I've been feasting on lately, on all the YouTube tributes to Alexis Carrington Colby Dexter. Marvellous. I've been channeling her a little bit lately, not very much, but it's I'm coming into that season where I want to be a bit more Joan-like here and there. I digress. But, you know, that sort of villain is glamorous. One of the reasons that Meghan is such a great big flop is that even as the villain that she is, and undoubtedly my favourite character in any piece such as a pantomime or Disney movie, you know, the villain is always my favourite, always my favourite. But her crime, Meghan's crime, is that she is a low-octane villain. Perhaps she doesn't realise that she is one. She likes to think of herself as the heroine, the ingenue, the little fancy piece. But if you are going to be a diva, my dear, or some sort of grand lady, you know, grand at times in the vein of Princess Margaret Rose, shall we say, who had her grand moment, or even a Princess Michael of Kent, do it as they did, with a bit of flair, with a bit of panache, and some style, darling. Do it that way, and then you might actually convince me if you do it well. You know, I could do a reversey Percy and start admiring a little bit of that wickedness. I mean, that's pushing it a bit too far. I would never admire what they get up to, my dear. But you understand, it's the style, the campery. If you're going to be a villain, camp it up, tart it up, my dear, dress it up. Don't give me low-octane beige. Don't give me that, darling, you know. But you understand, in the professional world, she is so uninteresting that she would never be successfully cast as a villain in anything, as you suggest that she might, my dear, because she is so bland and magnolia, and she is very safe on screen. I think that she, from what the small bits and bobs I've seen, she's a competent actress. Some enjoyed her performances in Suits. She's competent, but in order to be a lovable rogue or a villain that one loves to hate, the performer requires a lot more talent and a lot more skill. And the performer also requires the ability to eke out sympathy, even for a villain or for a baddie. And that's very difficult to do with Meghan, isn't it, my dear? I'd say impossible. And she's not got one iota of camp appeal. In fact, camp appeal is sorely missing throughout monarchy these days, I've got to tell you. Catherine, for example, she doesn't have one iota of camp appeal either, but she's beautiful, so she gets a pass, and has many moments of glamour. And Catherine is actually the good fairy of the plot anyway, so there are different requirements for the good fairy of the plot. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester have been in Northern Ireland, visiting with members of the community to celebrate their work. At the Ulster Folk Museum, their Royal Highnesses learnt about the preservation of everyday traditions, and the museum is celebrating its 60th anniversary. The Duke popped into the Railway Preservation Society and launched a steam locomotive back into traffic for the first time in 22 years. He observed environmental improvements at an eco-park, a food processing plant and a horticultural society. And the Duchess took in a royal parade of Emmanuel Church's food pantry and jollied with youngsters with additional needs. Together they met with performers at Northern Ireland Opera. Kate says, I do enjoy your confidence, River, and it is welcoming to see someone comfortable in their own skin. Well, most of the time, my dear, like the rest of us, I have my confident moments and my not so confident moments. You know, I am human. I'm not always on some sort of Fraulein Maria mission with suitcases singing I have confidence in sunshine and rain, my dear. But I understand what you're saying, and you say that you are curious about two things, if I may ask. What are your favourite colognes to wear, and do you have a pet? And I'm sure I've addressed both these questions in the past, but it has been a while, so just to indulge the question, I will say that I don't really wear any scent recently. I've kind of got off the idea, but one goes through phases, doesn't one? So I'm sure I'll be back again on something soon. The only signature scent that I've come closest to wearing for a long period of time was Eau de Merveille, Merveilles by Hermès, which is based on a sort of ambergris scent, rather salty. That's because it ties into lots of memories. It was given to me by a friend when we were on a job in Cannes. Actually, in France, it reminds me of Cannes and the Riviera of France, and it's not too overpowering, and I wore that for a very long time. I expect I'll go back to it at one point, but you tire, don't you? And I've just been enjoying being fragrance-free of late, I've got to tell you. But I do have, I'm sure you will have this, my dear, I do have a box of memories, if you will, of old scents that one would wear, and you just have what's left, and you can pick it out and have a little sniff here and there, not even to wear, but just to remind you of times and places and people. For example, Fragile by Jean-Paul Gaultier has been phased out now, I think, but that was always worn by a great friend of mine, and that always brings her to mind, although it smells different on everyone, as scents do. It's the chemistry of the scent and your own skin and your chemistry that really brings it to life and makes it work, doesn't it, my dear? But I really do enjoy the memories and nostalgia that these various scents conjure up, of course. I don't wear cologne, as you say, although I did have a lover that wore a Tom Ford cologne, which just sent me, because I do enjoy men in cologne. And, oh no, I've got to go to the door like this. And it's really annoying, isn't it, my dears, when they discontinue a scent and you haven't stocked up on it, as they've done with this Tom Ford one, actually. I did squirt some orangey scents over the summer. Orangey, and one was this sort of berry hair and body scent that you can get from Rituals, the chain Rituals. I liked that for a little bit during the summer. One of the most interesting ones that I've squirted lately at one of my local department stores is by Frederick Malle, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll flash it up on the screen. And the aesthetic really appealed to me. The price doesn't appeal to me, which is why I didn't go ahead and indulge myself. It's I think a couple of £100 or something, so I'm not going to be paying that for this particular scent, because I'd probably get bored of it quickly as well. But it did have a very interesting fragrance, I've got to tell you, that I enjoyed. It smells like rich ladies, and it's got a sort of retro vibe, hairspray and makeup and powder. It's certainly not to everybody's taste, but there's something enormously evocative about it, and it makes me feel a little bit bougie when I test it out, a little bit bougie, and I think, in another world it could be named Rich Lady, and it just sort of elevates the mood, so maybe one day. And no, I do not have any pets, and I'm unlikely to for some time, because my life is too busy, first of all, to dedicate myself to any pets, so it would be grossly unfair to both me and the pet. But also I have allergies to most animals, so that discounts a lot of them. I would love to have a dog one day. Yes, I remember sharing this before. I'd love to have a dog one day, but I really don't like the thought of having to pick up dog poop all the time. I don't care how much one loves the animal and the creature. I am a very hygienic sort of character, and I just don't care to be mopping things up and having entrails all over bits of furniture all the time. So I'm afraid I just don't see it happening anytime soon, although I expect as I approach my dotage, then I will eventually relent and get one or two little dogs. As president of Victim Support, the Princess Royal provided a regal touch to celebrations for the organisation's 50th anniversary. Victim Support was founded in 1974 by a group of activists who felt that victims were being overlooked by the criminal justice system. And today, the charity helps 140,000 people every year, and the Princess congratulated staff for their remarkable service. They're going to round off on the subject of roast dinners, because I mentioned that I'd had one last weekend, and when I did that I got several comments about roast dinners. Ruth Green asked to hear about the tradition of the British Sunday roast, and Lorraine Price thinks that you can't beat a Sunday roast with lots of roast potatoes and mint gravy. And Lainey said that coming home from church to the smells of Sunday roast was always wonderful. And there was also a lot of love for Yorkshire pudding, as usual. People love a bit of the old Yorkshire pud, don't they, my dears? Well, there are many ways to cook and to serve a roast dinner. There isn't one size fits all, I'm afraid. Everybody has their preference. Everybody has their preference, and they can be arranged with a common touch, and they can be arranged with great skill, at great expense. But the Sunday roast is profoundly evocative to most of us here in the kingdom, especially those of us who have ancestry here going back generations. In many ways it is a religious experience for many of us. And in my family, especially throughout my childhood, you know, one would have a different Sunday roast prepared every weekend by a different family member wherever I was, because I would dart about quite a lot between family members. And my mum's roast dinner, for example, is a fairly traditional roast dinner. It's divine and quite prized for her parsnips. Then there is my grandmother on my mother's side, whose roast dinners are quite simply unbeatable, unparalleled. I'm sorry, I know I don't care about yours. You're wrong, my dear. Whoever prepared it, whatever it tastes like, nothing tastes like my grandmother's roast dinners. The best roast potatoes I've ever experienced, despite all the gastro pubs I've been to and all the highfalutin arenas of food. No one does them like my grandmother, my dear. She does them in lard and she bashes them about, but nothing fancy, none of the goose fats and the highfalutin this, that and the fourth, just generations of experience. Rather small spuds she does as well, but oh, the crisp on those spuds and the pillowy softness inside, just exquisite. And she usually serves cabbage with her roasts, which my mum doesn't normally do. And then my grandmother on my father's side of the family, another delicious type of roast, but very different. She uses swede, the vegetable swede, which other family members do not for their roasts as a rule. And that brings a whole new dimension to it, especially around this time of year. A whole new scent wafts into your nostrils as you walk into her kitchen. My mother does not actually like swede, so she doesn't care for that scent, but I adore it. And the smell of swede always reminds me of that grandmother. And actually she starts every meal with raw carrot sliced and dunked in a cup of water, which she keeps on the table. And me and my siblings and all my cousins would dive in and do our Bugs Bunny with the raw carrot. Not sure why she did that, but yes, her roasts come with swede and with various hams. But the idea of the Sunday roast and the offering to the general public became much more competitive, and I suppose you could say posher, in recent decades with the rise of the gastropub. You know, as many of our traditional pubs have closed down or changed hands in recent decades, a lot of them had to up their game with their food offer rather than the drink. And the Sunday roast is a really good money maker, and these days they can charge through the roof for a good Sunday roast, or even a bad one, because Diana from Australia says, visiting London now, had a Sunday beef roast at the local pub yesterday. So disappointing, not as described on the menu. The potatoes and carrots were boiled, not roasted, and the beef was tough. The cauliflower cheese was boiled, no cheese, no sauce. We'll be in Bath next Sunday and look forward to a better Sunday roast, fingers crossed. And I asked her where she'd had this roast, and she said it was at the Royal George in Euston Square, which is a Green King pub, and she paid £17 for it. Well, I'm very sorry to hear that for your trip here to the kingdom you had such a bad experience with the roast. That's quite rare. You don't normally come across too many bad eggs in that department, my dear, but you did. What a shame. I do hope, and I'm sure that you will find better in Bath in this weekend coming up. Let me know how it goes. And it reminds me of Sarah Jessica Parker, because she popped up in a recent interview. Did I share it with you before at the time? I can't remember, because I know that I sent the footage to friends of mine, because she mentioned the Bull and Last in Highgate, which is a pub that I know extremely well, and she mentioned how absolutely divine their roast was, and how all the Sunday roasts that she's had while she was here in the kingdom for the first 6 months of the year and staying in the area, how divine all the roasts were. And that is most people's experience with them.
And I had some unbelievable Sunday roast. There's a place on the border of Highgate called the Bull and Last. Do you know the Bull and Last? It's
They're going to love you now.
Incredible. It's not just their Sunday roast, and the same with Bull and Last.
Yeah.
It's all, their menu
The
is...
pub grub is good.
It's beautiful.
And you ask for the history. I can't really offer you the history, my dear. I don't know it, but, you know, doing a little bit of Googling seemed to reveal that the ritual came into being after people in the olden golden days returned from church on Sundays, and some were in the routine of having fish on Fridays, you know, fish and chips on a Friday night, for various religious and cultural reasons, and then some would then abstain from eating or eating various meats until after church on the Sunday. This is one possibility. Then there are others that say that it originated from the serfs and the squires of medieval Britain, and then one popular theory is that it became popular during the reign of King Henry VII in 1485. So take your pick, my dear. I'm afraid I wasn't there, so I don't know. All I can tell you is that the Sunday roast is a religious experience, a most beloved part of traditional family life here in the kingdom, and when it's done right, rather like a full English breakfast, the famous English fry-up, there really is nothing in life more divine and more delicious. Yumza. Nice to see you nice. Come back and join me again very soon, my dears, and thank you for joining me today. Leave me a lovely, juicy comment, and my tip jar is in the description box. See you next time. Ta-ra and toodle pip.